Welcome back to the fourth part of the final, time for show here, Sunday edition. And thank you very much, actually, for keeping us company for the last 1.5 hours. It has been. We still have some 30 more minutes before we wrap up the show. And let me just sample some of your tweets here. And at Newton, John Moore says, to imagine a transition government without Raila is, to my estimation, moronic. Raila wants a Nusu Mkate government. Come on, guys, shape up. And then there's a question for Dismas here from one of our viewers here at SK So. He says, please ask Dismas how matters of trust will be addressed by whatever changes he's advocating for. What we have is lack of trust and entrenched suspicion of each other. Dismas, it seems, according to Soy, trust is the main issue in this country.
I would take it to the next level and say it's not even just about trust. It's a culture of deceit that has entrenched our society, and a culture of psychophancy. We've got our leaders surrounded by many psychophants, that instead of them, when they have the chance of having a cup of tea, say with President Kenyatta or Raila Odinga, instead of looking at Kenya as a going concern to see how they can address issues around our national prosperity and our national security interests, for them, they're thinking on how they can become transactional leaders, make quick money to go and buy a piece of land somewhere or go buy a car or do something like that. Because you see, economies that have made progress, like Singapore, that are our contemporaries, or you can even go to Israeli. The leadership, the founding fathers sat down and said, for instance, in Israel, they said, what are our national security interests? How are we going to pursue them? So the nation knows where it's going. As some say, you had a similar vision. We had Vision 2030. But as soon as Jubilee took office, they turned it upside down. They came up with an entirely different thing.
Dismas, can you perhaps link the trust issue with an institution like IEBC, for instance?
IEBC is the issue that...
Or the electoral bodies.
Yeah, there's
because
no trust.
We've never seen any election board in Kenya which has been fully trusted by Kenyans. Because there are all those issues.
Yeah, one of the things that we did was to say, let's have an independent body. And we are hoping that the people who go to work at IEBC are actually going to be independent. That's part of the reason why they have security of tenure. Because today, if you want to kick out a commissioner, it's going to be a tall order. Unless you are like NASA, you go to the streets and demonstrate. But ordinarily kicking them out of office is almost impossible. But this huge appetite, historians call it the primitive accumulation of wealth. When you get appointed as a commissioner, the next thing, if you used to stay in Buruburu, you now want to move to Lavington, you want to buy a chopper. And the players in the electoral process are very happy to give you money to compromise. And you recall that Chebukati himself indicated a week to the election that he's aware of cartels controlling the commission.
Yes.
That when the commissioners go to vote, they don't vote because of the interests of the body called nation. They vote based on the interests of the cartels controlling them. That when you go for a meeting as commissioners, you're supposed to engage in a brainstorming session and come up with the idea, but people just go there to vote, so they become mechanical. He also indicated that majority of the commissioners and senior staffers only attend meetings when they're around procurement. If it's they're discussing ideas, they don't show up. But if it's around procurement, 100% attendance, meaning that all of us are very keen to accumulate wealth. And it doesn't matter. You know, in some states like in Sweden or in India, you are highly regarded in society based on your contribution to society. It's not about your bank balance. But in Kenya, you get appointed to the public sector, maybe the Ministry of Devolution or NYS, you go steal money, you use 20% to go through the criminal justice system. Next week, when you go home with a chopper, you are treated as a hero. In some communities in Kenya, if you're given a public position, and you do not steal, you go back to the village, you become a laughing stock. So those are the issues that we are supposed to address. So we cannot just sit back and say, we are going to trust the people at IBC. We need to have penalties for failure to respect office. Right now, you had an election annulled on August 8th, and nobody has been held responsible as we speak. So in Kenya, you commit a crime, you actually kill, and then you are elevated, you get a promotion, you become a role model in society.
Husband, I'd like to hear your view on this. Do you agree with the viewer that it's trust issues, deep entrenched suspicion that is our problem as Kenyans?
Yes, I think it is trust issues and just like this must say, politics of deceit, you know, that even the people who are, entrenching this mistrust in the society want to appear in the public as the key people who are ensuring that everything works well. And I think for IBC, I mean, we're not talking about trust in any other institution. We are talking about trust in our electoral system. And the bottom line is, if we have an institution that can just do 5 things, everything that they do is above board, and we can see that it is credible, Everything that they do is fair. It doesn't favor any side of the political divide. Everything that they do is free. Everything that they do is transparent and finally verifiable. If they can manage those three things, no one can then come and tell Kenyans anything about the integrity of that institution. And I think they failed terribly, to act above board and show Kenyans that they're about these five things. But I think the biggest thing is, even in their failure, you get a sense that the political players are actually allowing IBC to be independent. Yet beneath the surface, there are undertones, there are echoes of key political players who are holding IBC.
So the political players should be equally blamed.
Yes.
And this time around, are you talking just from one side, or both sides should be blamed for this?
Because the political class is an elite class, and we cannot say that there is one side of the elite that is better than the other. And I think their game plan is very simple: to protect their privileged position. And we cannot trust. It is difficult to have a situation where we trust one side of the political divide and not the other, when they speak about the referee differently. So it is very difficult.
Of course, this sums up what some quarters refer to as a toxic political environment in the country. Do you agree with the view, Kavemba, that trust issues and
I do very
suspicion
much.
is what to blame?
I do very much. Actually, that is the person who's got it very much. It is really about not trusting each other, being over-suspicious. And I want to give you a small history to tell you why some of us are very frustrated about what is happening, because we've been following up what is happening in this country. In 2007, 2008, during the post-election violence, the single key factor that made us go that route was the lack of trust in our institutions. You remember very well that those who were complaining, they said that they wouldn't even bother to go to court. That the level of suspicion and lack of trust at that point was so much that they didn't even think going there is worth it. Then we decided that we need to put a constitution that is going to have clear separation of powers, that is going to have an independent, and we really made sure that we have a structure that ensures that the judiciary is very independent, and that we also have independent commissions. And we did that in 2010. In 2013, the issue of trust had been taken care of to a certain extent. And that's why even the person who had lost the election had at least some faith in trying out whether there had been any changes in our institutions. So he went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did not rule in his favor. But he said, we don't agree with the ruling, but we respect, which was commendable, because that's how we build trusts in our institutions. Come 2017, now you'll understand where we are coming from when we are saying we are being frustrated by being taken out of our constitutional framework. Why? Because it has been showing indications of working, of improvement from where we were before. So in 2017, the same person goes back to court. And this time, as evidence that actually our institutions are starting to come of age, the Supreme Court agrees with their prayer, and the elections are nullified. None other than the Chief Justice publicly states that in that repeat election that I have ordered you to go, if you go again and commit the same irregularities and illegalities, and this matter comes back here, then we will not again hesitate to nullify. Now, that's why I want to commend that person for trust. How else do you explain the parties deciding that they won't go back? Yet they even had verbal assurance from and action speaks louder than what? The Supreme Court had already acted and nullified the election, and it had given its verbal assurance that if these matters are brought back. Now, why are we where we are? We are where we are because someone decided that they no longer trust that route, and they want to look for extra constitutional ways of solving this crisis, which in the real sense is the crisis itself. The only crisis, if at all, has been brought about by failure to trust and have faith in our institutions. I would be
and that includes the electoral body.
No, that's what I want to say. Do you know what the Supreme Court did? The Supreme Court found the IEBC culpable. That was historic. What that meant is that you either get it right or again we find you culpable. That is, we should have gone the whole, because who said that the Supreme Court would not have nullified it again? Do you know where that would have put us? It would have put us to a situation whereby the IBC would have no choice other than to reform and get it right. Because the institutions of state are doing their job and doing so effectively. Now, we are denying them that chance by creating artificial crisis so that we can benefit as political players from the same crisis we are creating.
Allow me to engage Dismas now. We have less than 10 minutes left.
Okay.
Dismas, clearly, it seems, election in Kenya is always emotive. It's always controversial. And this topic is the one that is now informing the debate of secession. The people are saying they need to separate. The People's Democratic Kenya, I believe, that is being propagated by some section of NASA. Of course, NASA or NRM has not come out, openly saying that they want to separate. We've seen some leaders from the coastal region saying that they want to secede. So basically, let me begin by asking, and this is a debate we've had before, is this even realistic, bearing in mind that there are countries, for example, Somaliland, who separated in 1991, they're yet to be recognized. South Sudan, it involved decades of fighting in their country. There's some case with Eritrea. Is this really realistic? What is being propagated by a section of NASA leaders? Actually, one of the members of parliament is also, I believe, going to table a bill in parliament to that effect.
From theory, it's realistic that they can plan the bill, then we go for a referendum, and the entire nation will vote. If they want those counties to separate, to secede, it's possible. But rather looking at the reason why, rather than looking at the global view, let's ask ourselves, why are we having these calls? All these calls come from failure of our leaders to respect the Constitution. When you go to Article 10, inter alia, it speaks about national inclusivity. The folks from Mombasa, the two governors, that's Governor Kingi and Joe, were saying, they keep on voting, but they don't see the benefits of their votes. And it's all about national inclusivity. If you had leaders who respected our Constitution, and when they're making the public appointments, it's around respecting every other Kenyan. When they're coming up with roads, when they're giving out public projects, you respect all Kenyans, then nobody will be talking about secession. Because right now, there is a common narrative in the street that if you're not a member of the KK privilege, then you're not going to get to the top. You're just going to be suffering wherever you are. You're going to be wallowing in miasma of poverty. That's why we said last week that our leaders need to place a premium on meritocracy. Right now, you'd be seated having a conversation with Kavemba, who is your classmate, but 5 years later, is the CS for roads or finance. Not because he's got any unique skills, but simply because his cousin from the village is at the top. And that's the reason why people in Mombasa are beginning to complain that while we are Kenyans, we've been excluded. People around Lake Victoria are saying, while we are Kenyans, we are being excluded. And it's not as if these things are not in law. They're in law. And I like the appetite Kavemba has about extra-constitutional. He loves talking about extra-constitutional. But what NASA is talking about is everything within the Constitution, so that we have that cohesive nation, so that we have national inclusivity. If you had national inclusivity, nobody would be bothered about secession. But because of failure of national inclusivity, there are people who have never ever seen a road in their village. But if one of their sons gets appointed to the top, then you see it happening. And we must not make a mistake and assume that it's only limited to the national level. No, it's also in the counties. You go to some counties, and the counties are complaining. They're saying people from a particular clan are the only ones being appointed to the county cabinet positions. So it's something that we must realize that as a nation, if we want to make progress, let's globally identify our national prosperity interest, national security interest, and respect the Constitution. It was such a tragedy yesterday that the majority of the people who spoke at the funeral of Korir, if the Pope was watching the proceedings from Vatican, he would say that's a model state in Africa. But unfortunately, for those of us who live there, you see those leaders having those conversations, we begin to wonder whether we're in the same world or there's something happening.
Hesbon, do you think there are things that needs to be addressed to make sure this kind of calls, stop in the country?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the question of inclusivity, that we need to feel like we are part and parcel of the national cake, irrespective of which part of the country we live in. And to a large extent, I also think that we need to have a governance, or a leadership that responds to the insecurities that people have, so that people rise beyond this ethnic identification to a situation where they have a feel that irrespective of the person who is at the top, my interests would be addressed. Because there is a sense in which you realize that the reason why we have the political dispensation that we have, where we want to identify as regions, as ethnic groups, is because our immediate needs, are not met, and therefore we run to the ethnic community because we are thinking this is where we'll find security. So if we have a government that will be very inclusive, that will be anchored on meritocracy as enshrined in the Constitution, address the issues of the common mwananchi irrespective of where they are, I think all these other issues that are propping up about secession will easily be addressed. But I think having said that, the second thing that we may want to look at is this a real threat to secede, or it's part of the multi-pronged approach by NASA? I tend to believe that it is part of the multi-pronged approach, especially if you look at the Kenya that we live in today. I mean, I don't think there is any region that you can say is exclusively, belonging to a certain demographic in this country in terms of ethnic extraction. I mean, you say the coastal region, I mean, everyone is in the coastal region. You come to the western region, everyone is in the western region. So it is a conversation that is a lot more difficult to execute in terms of execution.
Of course, the secession route is not a route that anyone will want to take in this country.
Within the law, it is something you can take, and it is happening everywhere. In Spain, it is happening. It is a lot more difficult. Right now, I think in Anglophone Cameroon, they are trying to secede, and there are provisions within local and international laws. But then if you look at the morphology of our country, I think it's a lot more difficult to execute because we don't have a region that is distinctly...
There's so many dynamics.
Yes.
Kavimba?
Yeah, first, now as a constitutionalist, let me agree that there is a constitutional provision for secession. Let me first agree. It's good to be very honest. Article 255 states the matters that can take us to a referendum.
Yes.
One of them is the issue of territorial integrity. That means that in case someone wants to get out of Kenya as we know it today, then it will require what? A referendum. But the question is, would secession address the issues that are making people want to secede? Now, I want to agree that one of the issues is the issue of inclusivity. But I want to give you an example of Mombasa County, where the governor is among the proponents of secession.
Yes.
In the last election, 2013, when he was elected the governor, I come from a community known as the Kamba. Yeah, I want to give you a very practical example.
Yes.
You remember very well the Kamba then had a governor Wiper who was Shabal. So the ODM is the one that elected Joe. Just like this time they had Hassan Omar. But I want to talk of the period between 2013 and 2017. Kambas in Mombasa were complaining of being left out. That is a fact. Exclusion. Are you getting it? They were saying that because they voted for a Wiper gubernatorial candidate, the governor has deliberately not have, of the 10 county executive committees, there was no Kamba. Of the chief officers, there was no Kamba, and yet they have a substantive chunk of presence in Mombasa. That simply means that secession by itself would not address those issues. There is something that needs to be done more than just to secede, because you can secede and then you also have the same issues of some people feeling excluded in that new territory. So that is not a solution to the issue of others being excluded. That's what I wanted to come out clearly.
Yes.
So I do not think that secession by itself is a solution. I want to agree with Esbon that it is a continuation of the disruptive agenda to force the government to give in to some demands.
Actually, my director tells me we are out of time. Both Dismas and Esbon, you have 1 minute. That is 30 minutes each. Your final comment.
30 minutes, that's sufficient
I mean,
time.
30 seconds, sorry.
Yusuf, in my view, what President Kenyatta needs to do and Raila Odinga is to realize that they've got so much power in Kenya today, and their word is as good as law. So instead of them running around small circles, they better sort out the issue now. They better nip it at the bud. Because if they don't want to have a conversation right now, 6 months or 1 year later, they're going to be forced by external players to have this conversation.
Dialogue is the thing. Husband?
I think for me, again, it's just what we are talking about, leadership. We need leadership at this point from both President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga.
Yes.
And of course, we need to exercise some sort of integrity in the kind of conversations that we are having as citizens of this country, that we need to start looking at things as Kenyans and not as Jubilee supporters and NASA supporters or President Uhuru Kenyatta supporters or Raila's supporters. If we can address issues, take positions. And once you take a position, even if it is leaning towards Jubilee or NASA, move a step further and advance the reason why you're taking that position. Get as many people into that position so that ultimately we have a solution. Yes.
Fantastic. Very briefly.
Yes,
November.
that,
30 seconds.
The Constitution is very clear that we all have a duty to uphold, respect, and defend the Constitution. Let us look for solutions within this Constitution because it was not imposed on us. The good thing is that it has well built inbuilt mechanism to tackle any situation that we come across as a country. It is going to be very dishonest and selfish for anybody to try to take us out of that because of obviously the risks involved.
Yes.
So that is going to be my call, that let's all respect the rules because these rules were not imposed on us.
Well said. Many thanks indeed. Mutinda Kavemba is a political analyst. Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst, as well as Hezbon Willow is a political analyst. Many thanks for your input, all, gentlemen. And before we end the show, I think I'll just read a tweet here. It's a very interesting tweet from Eston Kimaswoch, who says, this is a program that has never observed the gender two-third rule. It's never has had a lady participant since its inception. I promise you, Eston, next weekend, that is on Sunday, we'll have a woman here in in our panel. Many thanks for watching. Of course, this has been Sunday edition right here on KTN News. We're now out of time, but stay with us. I'll be right back with all the latest news in the country and, of course, in the international scene. Stay with us. I'll be right back. Stay with us.